So these are two of the original emperors of China. The heads are about 100 meters tall. And here they're in the park holding Ganoderma, which was reserved for the royal family many thousands of years ago. It's been called the 10,000-year mushroom, also the mushroom of immortality, because people can live better longer. These are all documented conditions that Ganoderma works against. Liver dysfunction, including chronic hepatitis, kidney dysfunction, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, number of forms of arthritis, insomnia, bronchitis, asthma, gastric ulcers, hardening of the arteries, low white blood cell count, meaning low immunity, diabetes, anorexia, and cancer, just to name a few. So just imagine if the drug company could have a drug that would do this, right? Wouldn't it be an overnight blockbuster? But you can't patent a natural molecule. So what does this herb exactly do? When we start looking at inflammation, the Time cover story calls inflammation the secret killer. All of us have some level of silent inflammation. Inflammation precedes repair, but there is a level where the inflammation becomes destructive. So they have a term in the literature called inflammaging. We know that one of the primary factors that age our cells, age our bodies, age our brains and everything in it is the inflammatory process. So it has implications for the brain, the immune system, the body, skin, sexual function, bone, and heart disease, all related to chronic inflammation. So there's this molecule, it's called nitric oxide, and that's what NO means. Heart surgeons or doctors knew for over 100 years that if you gave someone that was having chest pain nitroglycerin, if they put it in their mouth under their tongue, their chest pain would resolve. They knew that there was something in it that would dilate blood vessels. So they had a whole team of researchers get together and try to find this amazing molecule. Once they found it, they thought, wow, we've got an amazing drug for cardiovascular health. One of the primary researchers on nitric oxide was a gentleman by the name of Nathan Bryan. After they discovered nitric oxide, the drug companies wanted to come up with, of course, another nitric oxide drug because they know that this molecule is so powerful. So they started looking at traditional Chinese medicines that had cardiovascular benefit, including Ganoderma. When they found that Ganoderma worked really well, what he said was the next step was to identify the active components in the traditional Chinese medicines responsible for producing nitric oxide. Nathan Bryan said this, he says, every time we took something out of the herb, it didn't work as well. So it wasn't something in the herb, it was the herb. So Ganoderma was the herb that increased nitric oxide. There's a synergy in nature that cannot be duplicated and cannot be isolated. Nature provides. It's got all the things that we need if we learn to use it wisely. When we start talking about cancer, U.S. has the highest rate in the world. Man's risk lifetime in the U.S. 1 in 2. Woman's risk 1 in 3. Before the age of 55, Americans' number one fear is cancer. After 55, it's actually Alzheimer's. Now, people rarely die from a single solitary tumor. What they die from is when the tumor spreads or invades or metastasizes. So what they did is they took highly invasive human breast and prostate cancer cells. That means it's the kind that will spread very easily. And when they gave them Ganoderma lucidum, there was suppression of cell migration, which means that it could protect against the spreading of cancer. Very powerful anti-cancer herb. When they looked at people that were going through chemotherapy, they found people that took Ganoderma generally had better quality of life, better well-being, less fatigue, less depression, etc. What it did is it protected the brain and the mitochondria from the toxic effects of chemotherapy. When we start talking about Alzheimer's disease, brain research, it says the results prove a hypothesis that the anti-aging Ganoderma lucidum, anti-aging, that means it's proven that it's anti-aging, can prevent the harmful effects of beta amyloid, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease. It also protects against the neurodegeneration and can restore function in Parkinson's disease. 60 million Americans have disturbed sleep. So 3-day administration of Ganoderma lucidum significantly increased total sleep time. Ganoderma decreased the amount of time it took to fall asleep and increased total sleep time. And it did it by what's known as a GABAergic mechanism. The most excitatory or most pick-me-up neurotransmitter in your brain is called glutamate. Glutamate is converted to GABA. Ganoderma promotes that. So it takes you from a very excitatory or anxious neurochemistry to a very, very calming, peaceful neurochemistry. I have a good friend who's an herbalist. 15 years ago, he went for a drive on a Sunday afternoon. He and his girlfriend were hit by a felon fleeing the police, a drug dealer. He was going 70 miles an hour when he hit their car. She was killed instantly. He woke up 3 months later with his spinal cord severed in his neck. They told him he'd be paralyzed for his entire life. When he could speak, he told the doctors, "I will walk again." So they set him up with a psychiatrist because they said, "You need to come to grips with what's happened to you." Well, Michael had been an herbalist for, at that point, already 15 years, and he was taking Ganoderma lucidum as well as other things. And he actually had some spinal cord regeneration to the point where he got about 80% back in one arm, 70% in another, about 50% in one leg, and 20% in the other. So with a walker, he's walked as far as a mile, right? So he got function back. And as this reference shows, Ganoderma promotes survival and regeneration of injured spinal motor neurons. When we start looking at our toxic world, we can see toxins from over 500 miles in space. It's estimated that everybody walking around has at least 700 toxins in their system. The symptoms of chronic poisoning include fatigue, sleep disturbance, intestinal distress, allergy symptoms, headaches, confusion, and anxiety. I've said for more than 20 years now, if you took those symptoms away, I'd probably have to do something else in clinical practice because that's what everybody's walking in with. The liver and kidneys are the primary organs of detox, and Ganoderma is remarkable at both protecting the liver and kidneys and facilitating detox. So when you think about all the toxins that we are inadvertently exposed to, it's critical that we protect ourselves all the time. I was lecturing in Minneapolis, and there was the president of the Autism Association there, and she had read a testimonial about how a child was given Ganoderma and started getting normalized brain function back. And she asked me, is there something to that? So I'm a research guy. I could not find a single study on Ganoderma and autism. So instead, I wanted to look at the causes and effects. Ganoderma is known to be an antioxidant, an anti-inflammatory, an anti-tumor, an anti-ulcer, an antiviral. We already talked about Ganoderma promoting sleep through what's known as a GABAergic mechanism. It converts glutamate to GABA. So the role of glutamate in the pathogenesis of autism. Remember, it can cause catastrophic neuron degeneration. So if we can buffer glutamate, we can protect the autistic brain. I had a patient come in who's HIV positive. She had been on a drug cocktail for a number of years, was being intoxicated by the drugs and not feeling really good, came in kind of struggling. So I put her on a comprehensive detox program, and part of what I gave her was an immune support program with Ganoderma. She came back 2 weeks later feeling dramatically better with her blood work in her hand that she had gotten from her hematologist, her blood doctor. She said, my doctor is amazed. He said, "What are you doing?" Because her white cell count was the highest it's been since she's been under care, and her lymphocyte count was the highest it's been. At this point, I didn't even know that Ganoderma had anti-HIV activity. I just thought it was good as an immune support and an antiviral. But notice what it says, Ganoderma spores had significant anti-HIV protease activity. I had another patient come in taking Valtrex for genital herpes. The drug was expensive, he wasn't feeling very good on it, it wasn't as effective as he wanted it to be. So I looked up Ganoderma, and guess what? Herpes as well. And Ganoderma speeds recovery of herpes outbreaks. Ganoderma inhibited the growth of H. pylori, which infects 2/3 of the world's gut. It also inhibited Staph aureus. H. pylori is considered a causative organism of gastric ulcer, and it may also cause gastric cancer. So I had a woman come in with a staph infection. She had a cut on her face that had been infected with staph. It wasn't healing. They gave her a very powerful antibiotic called vancomycin that wasn't working, and it often doesn't. And she was feeling really desperate. She thought they were going to have to cut this deep wound and create a scar on her face and just keep it from spreading in her body. We made her a poultice of Ganoderma and coconut oil, which, by the way, coconut oil also has anti-staph properties. Not only did it kill the infection, but it was completely healed in 7 days. Beautiful result. When we look at immune function, we've already talked about cancer. It's anti-breast, anti-prostate, anti-inflammatory breast, anti-leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma. It's anti-H. pylori, anti-staph. Some of the other viruses, anti-HIV, anti-herpes. It's also anti-H1N1 and anti-HPV. These are all documented benefits in the peer-reviewed literature. The top diabetic drug in the world is called metformin. Metformin blocks a liver enzyme that has the liver make sugar. Since the diabetic has a hard time getting sugar into the cell because insulin's not working, the liver actually makes more. So metformin blocks that enzyme. Ganoderma blocks the exact same enzyme as metformin. Now, metformin has a number of side effects and a 21% failure rate at 5 years. Ganoderma, remember, treats and positively modulates a ton of conditions, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, weight loss, brain chemistry, antiviral, anti-cancer. Seems like it'd be the thing that we want to use.